Okay, it looks like we're live. I need to figure out how I can see the chat. Here we go, comments. Okay. And yay, Raya, thank you. Everything looking good, Raya, because it's a new interface and I don't have the information I really want. Great, okay, fantastic. We're more on time and everything. This is wild. Okay. Let me, okay. 1 p.m. All right, so thank you for joining us. We're here today talking about something that didn't make it into the mainstream news, bizarrely, but that was news this week. Something we think everyone should be talking about, something we think everybody should be taking action about. But I think it feels a bit too much like science fiction, and people don't really believe it's actually happening. And so we want to let you know that it really is. What am I talking about? I'm Virginia Spielman. I'm the Executive Director of START Institute. I'm a British trained occupational therapist. And I'm here with Ira today, Ira Kraemer, who is the autistic science person and has a brain I'm in awe of. Ira, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more and where people can find you?
Sure. I have a blog called Autistic Science Person. The blog is just autisticscienceperson.com, and I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. I'm just basically an autistic person doing stuff. trying to make things better, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're talking about today is really heavy. And I want people to know that. So that's why we put trigger warning, content warning at the top here. But just because something's heavy doesn't mean we should ignore it. If you're lucky enough to be able to take a break from this as we talk, feel free, drink some water, do some self-care pieces, but we do also want people to take action. So what we would really love is for you to be really engaged in the comments, share this across platforms and so on. We're talking about a court case this week to do with the Judge Rotenberg Education Center versus the US FDA. Ira, do you want to summarize what happened this week or yeah?
So I think I want to go ahead and give a summary of the general controversy surrounding the Judge Rotenberg Center, if possible, because I think it's hard to understand what an overruling of a ban is if people don't know what the original ban was about.
Yeah, let's do that.
So there is a place called the Judge Rotenberg Center in Massachusetts, and they work with disabled people, generally people with developmental disabilities and people with intellectual disabilities. So the center uses aversives to essentially punish the students into doing different things. It's based on behavioral modification, which is based in applied behavior analysis, which is a whole kind of other topic to go into. So I won't go into that right now, but essentially they use this device called the graduated electronic decelerator, which is, and again, if this is really heavy, please do not feel like you need to be listening to this right now. Take a break, watch it later, or when you're feeling better. But this is going to be starting to talk about electric shock in disabled people. So the GED is a graduated electronic decelerator device, and it's currently being used to electrically shock developmentally disabled and people with intellectual disabilities at this center, in particular in Canton, Massachusetts. And so there was a ban on this device by the FDA in 2020, March 4th, 2020, I think is when the ban actually happened. But it was only for specifically behavior modification. To my knowledge, I don't think it's used for any other purpose aside from used as an aversive at the center. However, they didn't outright ban the device. So this overruling that happened by the DC Circuit Court this week basically was a case where they ended up they overruled the FDA's ban on the device because they argued that it was in conflict with a certain section of law, because they didn't fully ban the device in all the functions. They only banned it for the purpose of behavior modification. So now the device is not banned anymore, and this has been overruled, and this is why we are talking about the hashtag Stop the Shock on Twitter and Facebook and all social media.
So the 2020 ruling was, no, you can't use this, which they, as far as I can tell, ignored. And then the overruling at the US District Court of Appeals, the DC Circuit this week, was on a technicality.
Exactly. Yeah.
It wasn't about morality. It wasn't about human rights. It wasn't about the fact that this has been already condemned by I want to say the UN, am I right?
Yes, it has been condemned by the UN as torture. Yeah.
And so the overruling this week was completely on a technicality that is arguable, whether or not it's correct, I suppose is the word. But what we need to draw attention to really is this is happening, and people need to take action. There needs to be a very, very big movement, and a very loud movement. From my perspective, every occupational therapist in North America should be calling their senators, writing letters, asking their local news outlets why they're not reporting on this, spamming people as much as they can, because this is an occupational justice issue. We have the whole school is an issue. We have young people going into this school, and all of this is public domain, by the way. You don't actually have to be a great detective to find this information. So it's very, very much out in the open. There's a report from 2006 that we've already put in the discussion for this event, where you can read the report on this school step by step. And one of the things was when the children initially come to the school, when the students, they're young people really, that they're put in a room and nobody really engages with them. They don't have anything to do, but their negative behaviors are counted. It's data collection. And then that's their baseline of negative behaviors that then need to be extinguished, I suppose. And you read this and you wonder, like, if I was put in a room and no one engaged with me, how many negative behaviors I would exhibit, or you, or so on, right? That's where I think it's like science fiction to people, because they can't really believe that there is a center that we're sending our community members to, where they get deprived of food and they get electric shock devices put on them, only if their behavior is considered negative enough, and by some sort of court order. But they get these electric shock devices, not the same as therapeutic use of, sorry, Ira, I'm having word finding difficulties.
Electroshock therapy is separate from what we're talking about. ECT is a completely different treatment for things we're not talking about that here, because this is literally punishing someone for using electric shocks when they're awake.
So the theoretical principle behind this is similar to when you sit in a car and you haven't put your seatbelt on. The sound that the car makes to annoy you makes you comply with putting your seatbelt on, except this is pain, and actually sometimes leaves second-degree burns, and has been classified as torture by the UN. Is there anything else about the ramifications of this device that you can share with us, Ira?
So actually the devices so there are a few different versions of this device. The original one is called the GED-1, but they're currently using an even higher, more painful version of the device that was never approved by the FDA. And it was like loopholed into the FDA accidentally by an error. And in 2000 that happened, and the FDA either didn't know or didn't investigate and didn't notify the Judge Rutenberg Center until 2011. So this device was never approved by the FDA. It's still currently not approved by the FDA. It's not like regulated at all whatsoever from what I know. And it's still being allowed to be in use on people, like on disabled people. And it just doesn't really make any sense. And the FDA needs to ban this device outright completely. And that's what we're trying to get to do with like emailing and trying to get the CASA, the ASAN, the Restraint Act, I don't remember the name of it, but we're trying to get that passed as well to reduce restraints and seclusion in schools. So all of those things can help with, and also shutting down the Judge Rutenberg Center, because they've done plenty of other things that aren't shocking them that are also terrible.
Like
and
the withholding
also
of food. Yeah.
Right. Also plenty of aversives that are harming them. And I think there's been at least 5 deaths within the Judge Rutenberg Center, like since it's been open, of their students.
It's overwhelming, really, to think about it. The vast majority of students at the Judge Rutenberg Education Center are also people of color, Black or Indigenous people of color. So hang on, let's just take a step back. Like, how is it that a person ends up there?
Generally, so a lot of I don't know if this is accurate or not, but based on what I've heard from articles and the parents' descriptions, is that, these are some of the people who go there need full-time support. And in the United States, there is not a good system of full-time support carers and not expensive full-time support, right? Because our healthcare system is terrible. So there's like a very few limited options for parents to actually like send their kids or get help for their kid, basically. That's not like sending them into an institution or something. And so Judge Rutenberg Center actually advertises that they almost never exclude anyone from their center. So they're kind of even like, give us the people who have been excluded from all of these other places and we'll make them better, quote unquote, or like more compliant or whatever. So it's even kind of like advertising towards those parents who are desperate and like don't know what else to do to support their kid.
Right. So when I hear you say that, I think about the fact that the systems are broken from infancy for neurodivergent individuals. And so you get children being put into compliance-driven neuronormative interventions that don't honor the individual. And so I had a mentor once who talked about the buildup of resentment and how that spills out eventually. And so then you get families who've done what everyone's told them to do diligently and faithfully, but have big kids now or young adults with this buildup of compliance conditioning and resentment from not being heard and probably not being given the communication supports that they need. So the systems failed these families. these young people are angry and they're not equipped to communicate and problem solve because they haven't been given the tools, and they don't even necessarily have the message that they can communicate and change the world because they've never been able to say no to things. And then we go, oh, what are we going to do with these angry young people? And then we send them. And obviously this isn't the parents' experience, but the parents' experience is, I've done everything I was told. And now I don't have anywhere to turn because I'm not even potentially safe in my own home. And so I'm going to trust these people when they tell me to go to JRC.
And the first time that a lot of parents have told me this on Twitter is like when they get the autism diagnosis for their child, they're told to go to ABA, right? So like a lot of times it's probably the only thing that has even been offered to that disabled person is like no communication supports, I saw nothing about communication supports at the JRC website, nothing about like sensory sensitivity and sensory supports for anything like that. And so like the other big thing that I wanted to bring up was the main argument for using these shock devices is to reduce self-harm and aggressive behaviors. And the idea that you can reduce someone's self-harm by hurting them externally when they're not in control of that, the idea of doing that to someone and having them be like mentally okay after doing that to them, just like the research shows that that's not true, right? Like there's a research paper from Shigeti et al. 2009, last name is Shkedy, if you want to look it up, specifically about self-injurious behaviors like in autistic people. And they're like, yeah, a lot of times self-injury is an attempt to heal psychological pain or other pain, especially for individuals with an insufficient stress response. Like that's why self-harm happens. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that you can argue for external stimuli causing pain to prevent that, it just goes against everything about like caring for another human being or like understanding them or like, helping them communicate why they're doing it, right? Because it's probably because like something in the environment, they can't communicate. They don't have a good way to communicate with them. Like they're in medical pain. There was someone at the Judge Runberg Center who had a broken tooth and was moaning and was getting shocked because she was moaning and they didn't know that she had a broken tooth. Like they're arguing that these are aggressive behaviors, and then they also end up applying it to all of these things that are just like being a human being. Get shocked for not taking your coat off. I have like a whole list that I could read off that would be really heartbreaking, but I feel like it should be unnecessary, but yeah.
Read the list.
Okay, so things that they've shocked disabled people for at a Judge Rodenberg Center include stimming, rocking, moaning from being in pain, the example I just said about a broken tooth. Someone was shocked repeatedly for screaming because they were shocked. So they were continually shocked until they stopped screaming, which obviously they weren't going to do because they were in pain. For tearing up a styrofoam cup, for not taking their coat off, for just like standing up or like walking around or something like that.
Wandering, yeah.
For not staying on task for 10 seconds, and also for not having a quote neat appearance. These are all things that people have said that has happened at the JRC. None of those things are aggressive behaviors. Absolutely none of them.
But even if they were, like, that just it drives me wild, because like aggressive behavior or attention seeking or negative attention seeking, that's not actually a cause, that's a symptom of something else, right? Like it's either communication or it's a symptom of pain, or it's like you can't just stop at that. That's like saying, I don't know, they've got stomachache but not looking at the cause. Like it's a bit wild, really. And then when you're talking, and I think one of the things that upsets me so much is that I feel like animal behaviorists have moved beyond this even. Like,
Yeah,
it's not
many
okay.
have.
Like, we know that it's not okay to cause pain or to be aggressive, to teach someone not to be aggressive. Like, we know it's not okay. It's wild that we even need research to prove that it's not okay to hurt someone to stop them from hurting themselves or other people. Like, that's wild. So where do these people learn compassion? Where do they learn that they're valuable? What's the message that they're getting about themselves in the world? What's like, do they feel any agency, or do they just feel utter helplessness? Like, what are we communicating? It's astonishing. It's astonishing. I'm having a hard time speaking. So, you know, in 2000 and gosh, I can't remember, there was the Andre McCollins case. I'm going to find the year for you. It was reported in the New York magazine, 2012. And that link is in the discussion part of this event already, about an 18-year-old man diagnosed with mental retardation at the JRC, and his mom got a call saying, well, today he had 31 shocks. And one of them was because he tensed up his body in anticipation of being shocked.
Yeah, another account of this was, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, Jennifer Zumba, has been very outspoken about her time at the JRC. And Jennifer said when she got shocked, it was like literally like your muscle like tensed up and like you couldn't use your muscle for a certain amount of time.
Right.
Like, so the idea that someone would be shocked for tensing a muscle
An
in the
involuntary
first place.
response.
Yeah, and also I've also heard for flinching as well. It's just like absolutely inhumane. Like, there's nothing to say. There's nothing anyone should have to say after that to be like, oh yeah, that's really bad. Like,
Shameful.
it's bad. We know it's bad and it needs to be stopped, and that's why we're doing this right now. Like, to let people know, because literally I had people last night, I had a Twitter thread and I had people thinking it was a joke because they didn't think
like, this
it
can't
was
be real.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're and there's people like, oh, is this sci-fi? And it's like, no, this has been happening since the 1990s. Like, JRC started using shock devices in 1989.
They make them themselves.
Yeah, the newer ones they make themselves. Yeah. And also even Matthew Israel, who made the new version, says they're supposed to hurt. Like, they're not even like trying to hide that fact. They just argue that it's effective, which is the most backwards thinking that I could even, like, it doesn't make sense, right? Oh, we're gonna do we shock neurotypical kids now because it's effective? Like, of course it's effective. It's pain. Like, it's painful. The idea that it's
what do you, well, I mean, that comes back to this discussion that I think needs to be had in more circles about, like, what is research measuring? When you're told that something's evidence-based, what were they measuring? Were they measuring goals related to quality of life and self-actualization, or were they measuring goals related to the convenience of the person who has to handle the disabled person, aka compliance? You know, what are we actually measuring in this when we say something's effective? That's a huge discussion that needs to be had across the board now, but particularly apparent. Like, this is a black and white issue. I don't understand how this is anything but a black and white issue. I mean, I want Bruce Perry to know about this. I want Oprah to know about this. They just released that book, What Happened to You, about the effect of trauma on the brain, on the nervous system. Like, so Bruce and Oprah, we need your help. Like, we need some high profile people to take this up and make a big noise about it. We need John Oliver. We need, we need this to be on the national news. We need to be outraged about this. I wonder sometimes if it's not on the national news because it's a bit embarrassing, like the international news might pick it up. We have to do something about this. Do you want to say now some of the calls to action, and then we'll just circle back around because we've got some new people who've joined us, and quickly summarize what we're talking about again?
Yeah, sure. So I have a Google document that I wrote up. I think there's at least 2 or 3 other people who've written different like templates and stuff that you can use. And also someone recently wrote a letter through ResistBot on Twitter. It's really easy. It's like 2 clicks. I linked that as well in this action item. Basically, write to your representatives, your senators, to, ban the GED outright. Like the FDA needs to ban this outright, that it's a human rights violation, that it has been labeled as torture by the UN, and is not approved by the FDA, and basically just to say like we need to get this banned. And I also have another list of like different email addresses to send a template to like the FDA, to the Massachusetts Division of Licensure, and to the most important one is probably to the Department of Developmental Services of Massachusetts, because they're the ones who approved the aversive device use for the JRC. So I have a bunch of emails to send, and you can use there's 2 different templates and you can choose which one you want to use. And there's also I think 2 or 3 petitions. I'm not sure which one is the main petition. People have been starting petitions and changing it up, but there's 3 petitions also on there that you can sign.
Okay, I'm putting that link in the discussion for this event. I think I'm trying to do that now. So this is to your Google Doc.
Yeah, I can share the link again in the chat here if you need to.
And then, yeah, the discussion's different to the chat. So the discussion's going to stay after this event is finished, I hope. Facebook, please. So I'm going to park it there as well. Now, so a quick summary of what we're talking about this week. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center in Massachusetts versus the US FDA went to the Court of Appeals at the DC Circuit, appealing against a ruling that had banned them from using electric shock devices, wearable devices that are designed to cause discomfort and pain through electric shock. They were banned last year in March, and it got overturned this week on a technicality. The technicality was that essentially the argument from JRC's lawyers and attorneys was the FDA didn't really have, this isn't in their purview because it's such a specific population, I think. It's such a specific demographic that this is for, so they don't really have the right to say this. And so therefore that ban got overturned. Did I get that right, Ira? More or less? Yep. And so what we have now is this school in Massachusetts, this education center that is taking in young people with developmental differences, with neurodivergencies, with learning differences and other disabilities, and is able to continue using aversives. They use 3 levels of aversives. It seems like the majority of their work is based on aversives. An aversive is like the sound a seatbelt a car makes when you haven't put your seatbelt on, and it does the beat, it does the noise that's really irritating until you comply, right? But these aversives at this educational center involve withholding food and inflicting pain and discomfort, isolation, and other things.
They've also used a white noise helmet to isolate students before. A quick, I remember I wanted to state this as well. I haven't talked about this yet, but so the JRC is actually, someone made a good comment talking about how ABA is often the only thing that's reimbursed for insurance. So I wanted to make a comment about who's paying for the JRC. So a lot of the money, like the financial side of JRC, is actually coming from the public school system in the state of Massachusetts. So that means like taxpayer money is being used to perform aversive punishment on disabled people. in Massachusetts.
And like, I don't think we don't understand, right? Like, do not understand what's going on there. But I know these aren't a group of villains in a back room, like, what else can we do? But at the same time, like, there are better ways. There are ways to actually support humans that are kind and that are compassionate and that benefit the whole community. We don't have to manage the young people that we failed as a society with cattle prods and all sorts of other things. We don't know. And I'm using the word cattle prod as a really a dramatic illustration of what I think is an equivalent, right? But
it's probably just as painful as a cattle prod, to be honest with you. Like the actual like the actual current and voltage is, I don't even think that's like an exaggeration, sadly.
Yeah. I we're trying to be very factual. It's obviously quite hard. I'm finding it particularly, I think, I can't speak for Ira, but I'm finding it quite hard to sort of stay together, keep myself together as we talk about this, like, hearing that there's a white noise helmet to be used for isolation. Like, this is a spy novel and we're discussing the torture room. Like, this is not a school to help young people with disabilities. Tara and Hamlin saying cattle prods actually are better, I suppose, is what you're inferring, because it's a quarter of a second, whereas the JRC is 2 seconds. The shock lasts for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you go.
I was just gonna say there's a journalist who also said it felt like, so like for some reason they kept comparing it to like a bee sting as if that was okay. Like the people who actually, invented the device. And then
a bee sting really hurts.
Yeah. That's not something you have every day. No one just gets a bee sting, 20 times a day, right? But the reporter who was there tried it and described it as a horde of wasps. So that's any indication that this is completely inhumane and unacceptable and should be banned forever and never used for anything. I don't see how it would be used for any other purpose than to torture someone also. Like the idea that it was just only banned for behavior modification. There's no one else is using this device. It's just them. Just for torturing disabled people. The thing that really bugs me is like, in no way would this ever be happening to people who are not like, who are abled people, and this not be national news. Like,
yeah, imagine if it was like, yeah, or dogs at a dog training center.
Yeah, probably.
Right? We'd be horrified. It was at the local aquarium. We found out they were training the dolphins by inflicting pain. It makes the news, and we don't understand. Like, I've run out of words. We need to do something. We need some people with influence to get involved. We need to create a movement. If you're an OT, get every OT petition AOTA. If you're a speech therapist, if you're any allied health professional, if you're in human services at all, we really need you to do something. We need you to take this up, because it's not okay. There's no evidence, contemporary evidence, that this would be beneficial for a human being to experience. I feel so badly for the families and the current inmates at JRC. You wouldn't even do this in prison. Imagine if it was happening in a prison, the outcry on the national news. I'm sorry, I tried really hard to hold it together and I'm just losing it at the end. So we did say we'd do about half an hour. It's been about half an hour. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Raya's saying I'm bigging up the prison system more than they deserve, and you're probably right, especially in North America.
what really quick, something that's really important is if you live in Massachusetts, you have a lot of like power to change this. It's really, really important that if you live in Massachusetts, please, please email your representatives. There's a whole list in the action item Google Doc with all the emails for all of the Massachusetts representatives. So please do that if you can.
Rebecca, what attempts have been made to reach out to news organizations? We've been using social media to tag people. If you have other ideas, we'd love to know. I haven't done more than that.
Yeah, the main thing, if you ever want resources about this or anything in the future, just look up the hashtag Stop the Shock on Twitter and Facebook as well, and you'll find a lot of resources. I've been tagging the Google Doc as much as possible on that.
And if you are on social media, can you use that hashtag like 10 times today? Because it should be trending. I think it stopped trending, which is not okay. It needs to be trending. We need to get people's attention. So let's be really loud and boisterous about this. Yeah. Okay, I've got no more words. Ira, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks everyone who joined us and shared this. Keep going. Use the discussion page if you need support or you have ideas. And I think we're signing off for now.
Thanks for this platform.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do.
You too.